Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Learn Linux TV. You know, one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to Linux server administration, or actually just server administration in general, is rebooting servers. It's just tedious. And sometimes even getting a maintenance window approved, that alone can be a challenge. And I guess a bigger question is, why are we even rebooting, well, anything in 2021? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, KernelCare, now known as TuxCare, is a company that I've spoke about several times on this channel, and they aim to solve problems like these. It all started with KernelCare, where you can actually live patch your Linux kernel while it's running. Later on, KernelCare Plus hit the scene, and that was awesome because not only can you live patch your running Linux kernel, you can live patch your shared libraries as well, which means, well, even fewer reasons to reboot your server. Now, a brand new offering from TuxCare is QEMUCare, which does the same thing for QEMU. Now just think about this for a minute. Rebooting a server is a pain in and of itself, but rebooting your virtualization stack or any server within your cluster, that is also a pain. In this industry, what we do in general is migrate all of the virtual machines in our cluster off of one host onto another host in that same cluster. We update that host, move all of the virtual machines back, update that one, and essentially play musical chairs with our virtualization stack, which is just a tedious thing to go through. Now, of course, it could be worse. We have live migration now, but it's still a pain. Now, with QEMUCare, you won't need to reboot the individual hosts within your virtualization stack anytime the QEMU layer itself is updated. And that's awesome because that means, again, you have fewer reasons to reboot your server. In addition to that, you won't have to do complex migrations either because, well, with QEMUCare, the organization's virtualization stack receives the latest security updates without having to migrate or stop virtual machines. When it comes to managed services providers, you'll be able to keep your tenant systems running with fewer disruptions. QEMU itself is the basis for many shared hosting providers out there, and patching QEMU normally involves preparing other servers to hold the running virtual machines and migrating them from vulnerable servers. And what QEMUCare aims to do is simplify the patching process by shortening migration windows and no longer requiring hard-to-coordinate load migrations. In fact, QEMUCare aims to completely eliminate all of that complexity transparently and efficiently. Now, before we get started, I want to give you guys a quick disclaimer. Yes, TuxCare is actually a sponsor of Learn Linux TV, but I created this video because I wanted to check out QEMUCare, and not only that, I wanted to create a video that shows you guys how to set up ePortal as well for those of you that don't already know how to set it up. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the installation of ePortal itself, and then we'll see how to register servers to ePortal, and part of that is going to be downloading the latest patch set for QEMUCare. So let's get started. Alright, so here on my laptop, it's time to get ePortal installed. And to facilitate that, I'm already connected to a virtual machine that I've cleverly named ePortal. And this particular VM is running on my Proxmox cluster, and this is my cluster right here. I actually have two nodes in my cluster, PVE1 and PVE2, and we can see ePortal is running right here on PVE2. Now, Proxmox is not a requirement at all. It's just what I happen to be running the ePortal VM on my end. But on your end, you can run it on whatever virtualization stack you have, or you can even run it on a physical server. It doesn't really matter. For my VM, I set it up with 4 virtual CPUs, 4 GB of RAM, and a disk that is 200 GB in size. The thing is, though, you don't have to spec your VM quite as high as I've spec'd mine. For example, the minimum requirements for ePortal includes 1 GB of RAM and 1 virtual CPU. And for the size of the disk, it's recommended to go as high as you're comfortable with, preferably something like LVM, but that's beyond the scope of this particular video. LVM enables you to resize the disk of your VM without shutting it down, which is pretty cool. But anyway, the reason why I've spec'd the hard disk so high on my end is because ePortal actually downloads patches for other servers on your network, so it needs to have quite a bit of space to store all of those patches. But at the end of the day, how much space you actually need depends on how many patches you download. On my VM, I am running Alma Linux 8, as you can see, but you don't have to run Alma Linux 8 on your end. CentOS 7 and 8, as well as Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 and 8 are also supported. Anyway, what I'm going to do on my end is paste in the commands that are required to set up ePortal. On your end, don't worry about pausing this video and attempting to copy down all of the commands that I'm going to be using, because in the description below this video, I'm going to have a link in there to the blog post for this video, and inside that blog post, I'll have all of the commands that I'm about to use. So feel free to check out that link, and if you want to copy and paste all of the commands and follow along with me, you're welcome to do so. So what I'm going to do is switch over to root. The first command is this one right here. And what this is going to do for us is add the official Nginx repository, so that way we can grab Nginx directly from Nginx themselves. And that's all there is to it. And here's the second command. Just like the first one, what this one will do is add yet another repository. And this one in particular will add the ePortal repository that we'll use to install ePortal itself. And there we go. So now that we've set up the repositories, we're all set to install ePortal in Nginx, but before we do that, there's a few other things that we should do first to make sure that everything is smooth. And the first thing I'm going to do is run dnf install, and in particular, we're going to install policy core utils python utils, just like you see here. And this is going to allow us essentially to configure SE Linux to allow port 8000, which is required. So I'll press enter. And then I'll confirm with Y and then enter. And that's done. And I went ahead and pasted the next command. As you can see here, we want to add port 8000 to http:/port_t for SE Linux. And this is going to be required for the proxy that we'll be setting up. All right, so that's done. And next what we're going to do is run set se bool -P httpd_can_network and _connect. We want to set that to true. And what this is going to do is allow proxying for Nginx. All right, so far so good. The next thing that we're going to do is enable the firewall to allow port 80. So what we'll do is run firewall-cmd. The zone is going to be public. We want it to be permanent. We want to add a port. And the port we want to add is 80/TCP. So I'll press enter. And that was successful. And now with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and install ePortal. So the package that we're going to be installing is kcare-ePortal, and we're able to install this now because earlier we set up the repository for ePortal. So if you're following along with me, you should have everything you need. So I'll press enter. And since this is the first time that we've ever installed anything from this repository, we need to accept the fingerprint for the repository. So Y and then enter, easy enough. And then again. And there you go. Now what we're going to do next is set up a user for ePortal. And to do that, we're going to run kc.eportal. We want to add a new user, so -a. We'll type the username of the user that we want to add. And I'll give my user the name of admin, simple enough. And then -p, we want to set a password for the user. And what I'm going to do is paste in a randomly generated password. I recommend you do the same. And normally you wouldn't want a password to be shown in clear text at all. So just make sure you wipe your bash history or the history of whatever shell you happen to be using. So I'll press enter. And we should be good. So what we're going to do next is grab the IP address of our ePortal server. And here's mine. So I'm going to copy that. And And then I'll switch down here to another workspace where I have a web browser. And I'll paste the IP address right here. And then at the end of it, I'll add /admin, just like that. And would you look at that? We have a login screen. That's a really good sign. So I'm going to log in right here. And I'll paste in my super secret password. And let's log in. So there you go. We have successfully set up ePortal, as you can see here. So the next thing we're going to do is add our license information and also select a patch source. And to do that, we'll click on Settings and then Patch Source. And then all we have to do is just fill out this information. In my case, the URL is correct. So for the login, what you're going to do is paste the login information that you received when you purchased your license for ePortal. So I'm going to type in my username, and then I'll paste in the password, and there it is. Now what I'm going to do is scroll down, and the next thing is to select the products that you want to receive patches for. Now my test server will actually be running CentOS 7. I know that's a little on the older side to say the least, but I wanted to run something older that had a higher likelihood of needing to be patched, so that's why I chose that. So now that I have all of that filled out, I'll click Submit, and we should be good. And now, as you can see, we have various patch sets available for CentOS 7. That's really cool. So ePortal is all set and ready to go. So now that we have ePortal all set, there's a few more things that we should do before we add a server to ePortal. And the first thing that I'm going to do is go up here to Settings, and then I'll click on Feeds. And what feeds allow us to do is essentially have a set of rules for individual servers. For example, perhaps you have test servers that you want to update frequently. And when it comes to your production servers, maybe you only roll out patches to those servers after they've actually proved themselves on the testing servers. So what I'm going to do is click Create. We don't have any feeds just yet. And for the name, I'm just going to call it Main. That's good enough for me. I'll check the auto update box because I want patches to be updated automatically, so that way anytime there's new patches made available, then ePortal will go ahead and download those and make those available. And for this, I'll set this to 1. I want these patches to deploy after 1 hour. On your end, you can set this to 1 or maybe 24 hours if you want to make sure that updates are only deployed after they've been tested for a day. I'll leave this up to you. I'll click Save. And now we have our feed. Next, what I'm going to do is click on Keys. And we don't have any keys currently, but what this will allow us to do is create an activation key that we can use to deploy the software to another server, essentially to add the server to ePortal. So I'll click Create, and for the key, I'm just going to leave that blank. I wanted to get an automatically generated key. And then for the description, what I'm going to do is give it a simple description. And that should be good enough. And for the server limit, I'm going to set that to 1. And the server limit itself is exactly what it sounds like. Whatever number you set this to, that's how many servers can actually associate with this key. I set it to 1 in my case because I have one server that I'm going to be installing the agent onto, so that's good enough for me. On your end, you might want to consider setting this to however many servers you have licenses for, so that way you won't go over. For the feed, I'll drop this down, and I'll select Main. That's the feed that I just created, so I'll select that, and then I'll click Save. So right here, I have a key. So I'm just going to copy this. And again, that's going to allow me to associate a server with ePortal. I'm only going to be able to associate a single server, and any server that's associated with this key will be added to the main feed. So again, you could create different feeds for different types of servers. I'll leave that up to you. But for my purposes, this should be all I need. So now what I'm going to do is switch over here to a terminal. And as you can see here, I am still connected to my ePortal server. And on this tab, I have another example server. This one is called VMserve1. This particular server is running QEMU. So what we're going to do is associate this particular server to ePortal, and that's going to allow us to deploy QEMU patches to this server. So let's go ahead and install KernelCare. So I'll switch to root. And what I'm going to do now is run the command that's provided as part of the KernelCare documentation to get that installed. So the next thing that we're going to do is set up some environment variables. And it's very important that we do this before we install KernelCare, because if we do this out of order, the server might not actually register to ePortal. And these environment variables in particular will help us point our server to the proper ePortal server, so that way we can make sure that it's downloading updates from the correct place. So we'll type export, and then the first variable is kcare_patch_server in all caps, and then we're going to set that equal to http:// and then the IP address of our ePortal server. In this case, I'm using HTTP, but in production, you're going to want to use HTTPS, so you'll need a certificate installed in your Nginx proxy in order to make that work. On my end, it's just a test server anyway, which is the only reason why I don't care in this case, but when in doubt, definitely use a TLS certificate. Anyway, next what we're going to do is export another variable, and this time it's kcare_registration_URL, again in all caps. And again, we'll set that equal to http:// and then the IP address. But at the end, we're going to type a little bit more here, /admin/API/kcare. And the last of three variables we're going to create is kcare_mail2. And on your end, what you'll do is just set this to be equal to whatever the appropriate email address is for your organization. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and install KernelCare. In the same terminal window, what we'll do is run curl and then -s. And the URL is going to be https://repo.cloudlinux.com/kernelcare/kernelcare_install.sh, and we're going to pipe that into bash. Alright, so KernelCare is now installed. But in order for this to work, we're going to need to register it to our ePortal server. And to do that, we'll run kcare_ctl-register, and here we'll paste in the activation key that was generated when we set up the key earlier. And we'll go back to the browser, and I'm still here logged into ePortal, but since we went ahead and registered the server, we can see that we have the server listed right here. So we have the server ID, and off to the side here we have the key. And that's pretty cool because that means our server is registered with ePortal, and now we can go ahead and deploy updates to it. You know what? It's time to see an example. Now right here, I have a CentOS 7 virtual machine running on this CentOS 7 host. So what we're going to do is attempt to crash this virtual machine right here. And in order to do that, I actually have some proof of concept code that I'm going to be using. So what I'll do is just open up the text editor. Let's go ahead and open up that file. And here it is right here. And I'll put a link down in the description below where I got this code from if you want to go ahead and take a look at it. But what this C code should allow us to do is take advantage of a specific vulnerability on the guest virtual machine. And if successful, the virtual machine should crash. And this particular code right here takes advantage of a specific vulnerability, namely CVE 2018-5683. And I'll include a link down below to that as well if you want to read about that vulnerability. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this because I've gone ahead and copied it to the virtual machine. So I'll click on it to give it focus. And we can see here that I have reproducer.c already copied to the server. So what I'm going to do is just install GCC, and that'll help us compile it. And as you can see, it's installing, and it's done. So that installed really quick. So what I want to do is run GCC, and we'll compile reproducer.c, and the output file, I'll just simply call it reproducer. It should be done. And that was quick. It's a small file anyway. So what I'm going to do is run reproducer. And that's the binary that we've just compiled. So if this works, this virtual machine should crash. So I'll hit enter. Let's find out. And as you can see, the virtual machine is not really responding all that well, is it? You can see the cursor coming and going. Basically, what this crash does is it targets the VGA port, as I understand it, the virtual VGA port, and it's having all kinds of trouble now because I executed this script. So what I'll do is just go ahead and close this. And then in the terminal, I'll just make sure that it's closed out. And there it is running. So what I'm going to do is run sudo and then versh destroy and then the name of the virtual machine. Now what's interesting is that destroy doesn't actually delete the virtual machine, but it does force it to stop. Even though it crashed, it's technically still running. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. It's destroyed. I'll change the verbiage here to start. And I'll press enter. It says that the VM is started. So if that works, what I should be able to do is connect back to the virtual machine again. I think it was under utilities. There it is, remote desktop viewer in this case. Let's go ahead and reconnect to it. And I'll click connect. It should be the last one that I connected to. And I actually had to recreate this virtual machine. I don't know what that C code did, but it would never boot again. But it's okay, I'm starting it from the same QCOW image and it's not updated at all. So it's still a good test. I'll click connect. Let's go ahead and get back in there. So what I'm going to do is install QEMUCare on the host, which should actually protect the guest from that vulnerability, and it shouldn't crash. It's okay if there's some artifacts on the screen and things like that, but the virtual machine should not become unavailable. So let's go ahead and get it done. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up a web browser here. And what I'm going to do is go to the URL to the ePortal server on my local network here. So here I have the login prompt. So I'm just going to click right here and type in the username. So what I'll do is just paste the password right here because I'm too lazy to type it. And there it is. So let's sign in. And here we go. In the previous section, what I did was I showed you the process of enrolling a server into ePortal. But since then, I went ahead and deleted the server that I was using. I just wiped it out completely. And I rebuilt that test server here on this example server. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted to start fresh and show you the entire process. And I wanted to make sure that this test was clean and didn't have any artifacts from previous attempts. So what I'll do is click create right here, just like last time. And I'll leave key blank. In the description, I'll just call this second test. I'll set the server limit to 1. And if I scroll down for the feed, I'll drop that down. And I'll choose the same one as last time. So let's go ahead and save it. And then I'll scroll down. Let's see if we have a key here. And we do. So what I'm going to do is actually copy this. We're going to be needing that shortly. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and set this up exactly the way I did it last time. So I'll switch over to root. And I'll set up all the same environment variables like I did last time. So I'll paste in the first one right here. And here's the second one. And there's the third. So I have all the variables set up and ready to go. So now, just like last time, I'll install KernelCare and I'll get it associated with ePortal. And what that should enable me to do is deploy a patch to this host server that again should prevent it from being taken over by the CVE. So I'll paste in that command, and here it is. I'll press enter. And there we go. And then next I'll run kcarectl -- register, and I'll paste in the key, and there it is. And now the server's registered. So I should be able to go back here to the ePortal and see it listed, and it's already showing servers 1. So if I refresh this, you see that the server count is 1 of a maximum of 1. So it looks like everything was deployed. All right, so let's go ahead and deploy the patches. So what I'll do is run kcarectl, then --lib-update. And let's see what happens. And check this out. It says right here that QEMU was actually patched for one process. And that's great because I didn't have to restart the server at all. And it went ahead and patched that for me. So if this works, what that should mean is I should be able to actually connect to the virtual machine. And here I am. So what I'll do is just go ahead and log in. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So I was able to break out of the virtual machine, so as you can see here, it's still running. Last time it was completely unresponsive, so it looks like it's working, and that's awesome. Now the fact that there was some blinking inside the console, that's okay. That was to be expected. But as we were able to see, QEMUCare is installed, and it was able to live patch the QEMU process, which is going to mean that if this was a production server, I'd be able to keep it running longer without having to reboot it. So there you go. As you just saw, setting up QEMUCare is very easy. In fact, almost all of the work is done for you because all you need to do is register your server after you install ePortal, and you're good to go. Now let me know your thoughts about QEMUCare down below in the comments. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. And definitely click that like button if you like this content, because that lets YouTube know that you want to see more content just like this. Anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.